The first trick. The first time I asked Baba for something, I saw him turn the privilege of my asking and his giving into a lecture of how it was all God. How he was always there, just at the right place at the right time, because how do you turn a 29-year-old struggle into a son, into a daughter, into a family, into a success without calling it a miracle? You should be grateful is another threat he tries to dismantle into a teaching of how it can all vanish into an empty place one day. The first time I asked Baba for something, I saw him reach his hand so far up his empty wallet for an evidence of the statements he never had the courage to articulate that it felt like a magic trick. Pulling a rabbit out of the hat is an old go-to trick that the magician always uses but doesn't want to. Because the rabbit can die of suffocation, so the rabbit hair. The rabbit hair is an old Polaroid of Baba standing in front of the porch of his house with clenched fists. Fists that know more about communication than his mouth ever will, so I know the I know the story he's trying to translate. The Polaroid would probably tell us how small towns work, how they're only made by people that lend and borrow, salt lend, dreams borrow, loans lend, responsibilities of debts like the rabbit trick is not a trick. It's a sacrifice. It's adulthood. It's him telling me, son, you and me, we are not invincible after all. He called that Polaroid a window to his past which is translucent enough to blur out the scars but clear enough to reveal the silhouettes of a lesson he's trying to teach here, because how do you PG-13 a story of not killing yourself into a lesson? It's a euphemistic way of saying the struggle could only show the things happening outside the magic hat, never inside, never enough to reveal the actual trick. His dreams were nothing but a magician disappearing into thin air, and that's the most he remembers of his childhood. I'm nothing like my father. I'm not a magic trick practiced for hours and hours and hours until the magician learns to put a knife through his palms without letting a drop of blood to splinter out. And then turn the slit back to skin like nothing really happened. You see, my father numbed himself enough into believing he was invincible. I'm nothing like my father. I know my subway order by heart. I know my preferences while I voice them out loud, which is to say, I have a voice. Which is to say, the big city is not that big for me. It's just a city, not a dream come true, not an ocean of opportunities, rather a water body flooding up our home. No, I'm nothing like him. I can't hold conversation with a chaiwala and make him trust me enough to tell me about that one time he got lost in this big city, as if he and my father share the same story of a panic attack that they still address as a disease of the rich, or the ways God punishes us. You see, I don't really talk to the barista enough to know his first name. I know my orders, my preferences in music. I prefer my playlist to his FM Gold. We are two generations of men after all. Baba learned to play the cards he got dealt with like a magician, always hiding a trick up his sleeves, calling the spell man up, and there. He disappears into old classics and gold flakes. He believes if we are quiet enough, for long enough, the body will eventually forget it ever had a voice or it ever had a body. Baba raised me like that. We lived in houses we never owned. He spoke his beliefs enough times for them to echo and turn into aphorisms, and I made myself out of poems. So the first time I tell him I've been going to therapy lately, he questioned the man in me. And I know I did too for a while until I stopped, until I wrote a poem about it, until I became the suffocated dead rabbit inside the magic hat, the one who could have been the reason behind the claps and the amusement but chose to die instead. I'm nothing but all the things he couldn't do, like afford to be sad. I'm a privilege I should enjoy, but handling emotions is not something anyone in my family is fond of, so take this sadness. Take this sadness to be a trick Baba never learned. The trick of stabbing yourself with a knife is not a trick, it's an urge I've been trying to fight off. No, I'm nothing like my father. I know he doesn't smile much, but when he does, his mustache doesn't let us believe he is. Baba never let us understand the trick because we shouldn't. Because it's easier to be marveled by the things you know the least about. And I always looked at him in a form of amusement. I'm worried. That says a lot about our relationship. And for his final trick, Baba, no, the magician, goes up to his dead father lying on the pyre and says nothing and takes a bow. Because being a man is a magic trick that no one talks about and no one ever should, because you don't see it happening. My father's brain turned into the saddest poem I would have ever written way before it could become a magic trick. Did you know? Magicians give the trick they do a name, so what would you call being responsible of four brothers and migrating them into the big city? Marrying Ma as the death wish of my Nana, being everything he could to provide, and being a mouthful of nothings. We. We'd call that trick being a man. So the first time I asked Baba for something, he replied with an I'll see, while I unapologetically voiced out my demands, knowing the rabbit inside his hat is already dead. but I still snap my fingers because poetry taught me that, because I resonate with that, because being a man is probably the saddest poem I would have ever written.